Hey guys, Jason with CB Customs. So today we're taking a look at a little bit of the difference between the 6.7 Cummins and the 6.0 Power Stroke in the Fords. So what we're really focusing on is the injectors today because I have two engines broke down and I just happen to have the injectors so we can go over the differences between the two because both engines are broke down right now and we can talk about it. I also looked up prices, if you're going to get all the injectors for the 6.0 or if you're going to get all the injectors for the 6.7. It's all right here. The 5.9 injectors are very, very similar to the 6.7 for the Cummins. The 7.3 to the 6.0, not so similar, kind of a big difference. Caterpillar actually kind of had a big hand in designing the 7.3. This was a complete Navistar thing, so this was their answer to replace the Caterpillar injection system. So what we're going to do is go over the differences in how they work, which one might be better, might not be better, and how much you're going to pay to replace your injectors if you do them in a set. I don't recommend anybody does an injector at a time. If you have one fail, then the next one, let's say you got the 6.0, you got 8 cylinders, one fails, the other ones have just as much time on them. They're probably just coming. So you open stuff up, you just replace all the parts. It's my opinion anyways, as far as it goes to injectors. So let's take a look at these injectors and we'll talk about the differences and all that fun stuff. Okay, so let's start with this 6.0. This is a 6.0 injector. Power Stroke 6.0 came out of an 05. This thing works completely different from the way the Cummins does their injection system. Now they're both injecting high pressure fuel, but the 6.0 uses a solenoid right here, so it uses electric signal to activate high pressure oil that it gets fed right through the top. So high pressure oil is coming in, and then the electric signal is moving high pressure oil to open the valve and so the fuel is fed right here through the head. So the solenoid's energized, right? And it uses that high pressure oil to move the solenoid here to let the fuel ignite into each cylinder. And it honestly, it's a play on what Caterpillar had designed, and the 7.3s last forever and the 6.0s had a lot of problem, but the injector wasn't the problem. They just need other work. Now, the 6.7, again, Cummins, this is a lot like the 5.9. The injectors aren't that different. They both get their fuel from a feeding tube right here. The feeding tube comes out, and then it uses a solenoid to tell the fuel what to do for each cylinder fire. Now, this one is out of an 07, which on the 5.9s, they had two different events. Like I think it was a 2 and 3, something like that. So this has the 3, the higher event process. So these things are moving a lot. It's a much bigger solenoid. So the solenoid's right here, right? This is what's doing the work. On the 6.0, the solenoid is just this little guy right here, just going back and forth, telling the oil what to do. So it's a much different system. And if you look into changing them, that's what we'll get into right now is the money. Actually, I wrote everything down. So when you do these 6.0s, you have to change, whoa, I'm going to drop stuff. You have to change the tube. And some people don't, so I guess have to is kind of a friendly term, right? I always replace the tube. That tube seats steel to steel right there. So they start to get impressions and stuff, and if you don't replace them every time you replace the injectors, your injector could just get a leak. And what happens on these 6.7s, if this is not completely sealed properly between the tube and the injector, there's a valley inside the head right here, and you'll be leaking inside the head. You won't see fuel anywhere, but your engine just won't run because you can't achieve the high pressure. So I replace the tubes every time I replace the injectors. So if you're going to replace all 6 injectors and tubes, the company I go through, Injector Direct, you can get it online, all that stuff. They just happen to be close to me, and I like them. It's $1,500 for all 6 injectors. and then 250 something for the tubes. So you're looking at close to $1,800 for the injectors and the tubes. It's a little different. The same company for all 8 of the 6.0 injectors. I can get all 8 of the 6.0 injectors for with $1,200. So I can get all 8. Now that's $500 difference. Sounds pretty good, right? Sounds like the 6.0 is kind of a cheaper way, but not exactly, because it doesn't have the fuel feeding tube that hits into the injector. It does have the oil feed tube, and you've got to replace all your O-rings. They have tubes that go down in that manifold. It's like an oil manifold that goes across the top. There's a lot of parts you're going to have to change on that 6.0 every time you open it up. You're not going to put those O-rings back in. So maybe not cheaper, but you do get the injectors themselves cheaper. Excuse me. So I was trying to keep it short and sweet on the injectors, but those are the differences, and that's kind of the price differences you're going to run into when you need to replace them. The engines, both one's an 05, one's an 07. The Dodge is the 07. They're in here for completely different reasons. While at the same time, they're both in here for rebuilds. The 6.7 spun a rod. I know you guys might be interested. Why is the 6.7 already getting rebuilt? It only had like 200,000 miles on it. It's kind of early. I don't know if it was ran out of oil or what, but this is becoming kind of something I'm seeing with the 6.7s is spinning a rod. Not so much with the 5.9s. The 5.9s, it's always washed cylinders because of injectors, a different conversation. But with the 6.7s, the engines I've been seeing come through, they spin a rod. Now on the 6.0, the reason the 6.0's in here is the high pressure oil pump completely came apart, and it sent all that metal through the engine. Now when we opened up the engine and everything, the engine was actually in pretty good shape, didn't spin a rod or anything, but because all that metal went through that engine had to be completely broke down and rebuilt. And I do not rebuild engines without replacing injectors. Anyone who brings me an engine, I tell them we got to put injectors on it. If they're not okay with that, I'm not building their engine. Nobody would build something like this. You put all this money into a rebuild and then you don't replace the injectors. It just seems absolutely crazy to me. Now, another thing with the 6.7, because all that metal went through the end, there was a lot of metal in this 6.7. I've got a video on that if you guys are interested, but all that metal went through the entire oil system. So we're going to have to rebuild or replace the turbo as well. But same thing with the 6.0, because metal went through the engine, all the oil galleries. It's a much bigger problem with the 6.0 because it uses the high pressure oil and you have more potential for problems. With the 6.7, doesn't normally happen because it's like the cylinder walls. We can generally get away with just rebuilding the engine and not having to replace or rebuild the turbo. This one though, because it spun that rod and it spun it so bad that the piston came up and hit the head, we got to rebuild or replace the turbo. So that's what we're running into on this era of engine. I mean, these rebuilds are getting real common, and because these trucks are getting a lot older. But this truck still should have ran a lot longer, and so should the 6.0. Man, I can't even talk today. The 6.0 should have ran a lot longer too. 6.0s need a lot more work to be reliable. 6.7's pretty much reliable off the bat. They're both great engines. I think, yeah, we can go over the comparisons between the two. I actually own one of each, so I like them both, but there are differences. So I'll catch you guys on the next one. This was just kind of one of our quick tips and tricks things, but I thought people might want to know the difference between the injectors and the cost, especially if you're looking at buying one of these older trucks. Having an idea about that be important. I'll see you guys in the next one.